Students, today we are going to continue with the same chapter that we began last week, that is Footprints Without Feet, written by H.G. Wells. And I told you that this chapter is an excerpt from the novel written by H.G. Wells named An Invisible Man, which was a novel in class 12th earlier. So, in this chapter, we just read about a scientist named Griffin who had been discovering ways which could make a man invisible, and finally he swallowed certain rare drugs that made him invisible. And the story began with the two boys who noticed the footprints on the staircase of a house where they could just see the footsteps and not the feet of a person, which made them curious, and they started following those footprints until they became fainter and cannot be seen. And Griffin, because it was very cold, it was a cold season, it was winter season in London, so it was extremely cold and he had to roam without clothes. So he enters a mall for some warmth, and after the store was shut down, he decides to wear some warm clothes and eat something. So he first unboxes a few clothes and wears them. Then, from the kitchen of a restaurant, he eats cold meat and some coffee. Later, he goes to a grocery store and eats sweets and drinks wine. He then falls asleep on a pile of quilts. Then he woke up in the morning when some of the store assistants had seen him and started chasing him. So he again had to throw away all the clothes that he was wearing and became invisible in order to escape from those assistants. Then he started roaming around again without any clothes in the cold winters of London. Then finally he decides to steal from a theatre company, and because he knew that he would get something there to cover his face as well. So therefore he just gets the bandages, he steals the bandages for his face to cover his face, dark glasses, false nose, and a hat for covering himself. Then he hits the shopkeeper and steals all his money. Then soon he realizes that London is too crowded to live like this and decides that he would go to a remote village. So he moves to a small village named Iping and books 2 rooms at an inn over there, which was owned by Mr. and Mrs. Hall. And when he reached there, and it is strange for the people of Iping that a stranger with such a weird appearance has come to stay at an inn during that winter season when they do not expect any visitor. So then Griffin, he offers money to Mrs. Hall, who is presented as a greedy lady, and she keeps quiet and she does not object at the weird look or the strange look of the stranger and allows him to stay at her inn. Then, because of the money that was given to him by Griffin in advance, then once the money was over, Griffin again steals from the people and also hits the landlord and his wife. So we had read that he entered clergyman's house in Iping and steals the money from there. Then we'll read further what happens next. Further, the story says, then to his amazement, he realized that the room appeared to be empty. He and his wife looked under the desk and behind the curtains and even up the chimney, and there wasn't a sign of anybody. Yet the desk had been opened and the housekeeping money was missing. Extraordinary affair, the clergyman kept saying for the rest of the day. But it was not as extraordinary as the behavior of Mr. Hall's furniture a little later that morning. So, in these lines, the narrator is now telling us about the clergyman's room where the burglary was committed by Griffin. So, clergyman, he was very much amazed to see the room empty, because he just saw the drawer of his study table open and all his housekeeping money was gone, but he could not find anyone over there. And both he and his wife, they looked under the desk, they searched everywhere, behind the curtains and even up to the chimney, but they could not see anyone. But they were sure that the money had been stolen by somebody, and they called it as an extraordinary affair. Affair is an event or sequence of events of a specified kind or that has previously been referred to. So they considered this incident as very extraordinary incident, and then the clergyman, he kept on saying for the rest of the day, he just kept on discussing about it the rest of the day, and he kept on calling it as an extraordinary affair because he was shocked by the incident. But the things that happened with Mrs. Hall's furniture were much more fascinating. So this incident occurred in the later part of the day. Mrs. Hall and her husband woke up early in the morning, and then we'll see that what happens. The next paragraph says, the landlord and his wife were up very early and were surprised to see the scientist's door wide open. Usually it was shut and locked, and he was furious. Furious means angry. If anyone entered his room, the opportunity seemed too good to be missed. They peeped round the door, saw nobody, and decided to investigate. The bedclothes were cold, showing that the scientist must have been up for some time. And stranger still, the clothes and bandages that he always wore were lying about. So in this paragraph, it is said that Mr. and Mrs. Hall, that day they just woke up, both of them woke up very early, and they were surprised as the door to the guest room was found open. And usually the door of Griffin remained closed and locked, and he used to get very angry if anyone tried entering his room, and it was an opportunity. So Mrs. Hall did not want to miss that opportunity to enter the stranger's room, and both Mr. and Mrs. Hall, they decided to investigate when they saw that nobody was inside the room. And they went inside, and they saw the bed sheets were cold, which showed that Griffin must have been up for a while, and also they could see all the bandages that he used to tie around his face lying around the room. And suddenly, then we'll see what happened further, what Mrs. Hall experiences. Then suddenly what happens in the next paragraph says that the later Mrs. Hall, she heard the sniffing close to her ear. A moment later, the hat on the bedpost leaped up and dashed itself into her face. Then the bedroom chair became alive, springing into the air. It charged straight at her, legs foremost. As she and her husband turned away in terror, the extraordinary chair pushed them both out of the room and then appeared to slam. Slam means shut the door quickly and lock the door with after them. Mrs. Hall almost fell down the stairs in hysterics. Hysterics means, what is hysterics? Hysterics means the widely emotion and exaggerated reaction. So this came out of a shock. She was convinced that the room was haunted by spirits and that the stranger had somehow caused these to enter into her furniture. My poor mother used to sit in that chair. She moaned. Moan means she cried out of pain. So, to think it should rise up against me now. The feeling among the neighbors was that the trouble was caused by witchcraft. So, in this paragraph, the narrator says that what happened suddenly? Mrs. Hall, she heard a sniffing sound. What is a sniffing sound? Sniffing sound is the sound of a nose when you try to draw the air to detect a smell or to stop it running. So that kind of sound was heard by Mrs. Hall close to her ear, and then suddenly what happened? Griffin's hat that was lying on the bedpost, that is at the back of the bed, flung towards Mrs. Hall and hit her on her face. Then the mysterious things happened. The chair in the room dashed itself, hitting Mrs. Hall in her legs, and as they got scared, Mr. and Mrs. Hall, they both got scared seeing this mysterious thing, and Mrs. Hall, and they were, or they decided to move out of the room. And when they were going out of the room, the chair closed the door, and suddenly a sound of slamming the door and locking were heard. This terrorized Mrs. Hall, and she was about to fall from the stairs because she got very scared, and she was convinced of the thought that there were spirits in her inn's room, and that the stranger had caused this black magic to happen. Then further she says that now she moaned. She just started moaning for the chair that hit her, and she was not able to understand that why the chair hit her, as it belonged to her mother. And then she thought that how could it rise up against her. Then the neighbors of Mrs. Hall thought that it was witchcraft. Witchcraft means black magic, which had caused such a thing to happen. Then further, the next paragraph says that, but witchcraft or not, when the news of burglary at the clergyman's home came known, the strange scientist was strongly suspected of having had a hand in it. Having a hand in it means to have something related, or he was only responsible for this black magic. Then suspicion grew even stronger when he suddenly produced some ready cash, though he had admitted not long before that he had no money. The village constable was secretly sent for. Then, instead of waiting for the constable, Mrs. Hall went to the scientist, who had somehow mysteriously appeared from his empty bedroom. I want to know what you have been doing to my chair upstairs, she demanded. And I want to know how it is that you came out of an empty room and how you entered a locked room. So, in this paragraph, it is said that when the news of the burglary at the clergyman's house reached other people in the town, everyone started suspecting the strange scientist for the mysterious thing that occurred in Mrs. Hall's inn. And suspicion grew stronger on him when he produced a ready cash for his payment at the inn. And even though he had told some time back that he did not have money and was waiting for a check to arrive. Then the village constable was called for, and Mrs. Hall could not wait for him to come, for the constable to come, and he went straight to Griffin as he had appeared from the empty bedroom at the inn. And she asked him what had he been doing upstairs to her chairs and furniture. And she also asked him how did he come out of the empty bedroom or enter the locked bedroom. Then further, the next paragraph says the scientist was quick tempered. Now he became furious. You don't understand who or what I am, he shouted. Very well, I'll show you. Suddenly he threw off bandages, whiskers. Whiskers are the hair growth on the face which is coming from your nose or from your mouth. So, spectacles and even nose. It took him only a minute to do this. The horrified people in the bar found themselves staring at a headless man. Mr. Jaffers, the constable, now arrived and was quite surprised to find that he had to arrest a man without a head. So, in this paragraph, the narrator says that the scientist, he really became very angry and started shouting that they don't understand who or what he was, and decided to show them the truth. And for that he removed his bandages, whiskers and spectacles, and also his false nose. And all this took him just a minute to do all this, to remove all these things. And the people in the bar, they were horrified when they looked at the headless man. And in the meantime, Mr. Jaffer, the constable of the village, also came over there, and he was surprised to see the man and thought that he had to arrest a man without a head. So now the next paragraph says, but Jaffers was not easily prevented from his duty. If a magistrate warrant ordered a person's arrest, then that person had to be arrested with or without his head. There followed a remarkable scene as the policeman tried to get hold of a man who was becoming more and more invisible as he threw off one garment after another, and finally a shirt flew into the air, and the constable found himself struggling with someone he could not see at all. Some people tried to help him but found themselves hit by blows that seemed to come from nowhere. So in these lines, the narrator says that but Jafar, he was still wanted to do his duty, as he knew that the magistrate wanted him to arrest the person, and it did not matter that he had a head or not. And as Griffin threw away more and more of his clothes, he became more and more invisible. And finally, after Griffin removed his shirt, he was nowhere to be seen. And Jafar was found struggling to arrest the man who had become completely invisible, and he could not to find him or could see him to catch hold of him. Then further, the people who were trying to help Jafar, they were also struggling. So then we read further what happens. Then further it is said, in the end Jafar was knocked unconscious as he made a last attempt to hold on to the unseen scientist. There were nervous, excited cries of hold him, but this was easier said than done. That means it was easier to say but very difficult to very difficult task to be carried on. Why? Because Griffin was not visible to the people, and Griffin had shaken himself free, and no one knew where to lay hands on him. Where to lay hands on him means where to search for him. So now in these lines, the narrator says that the people who were trying to help Jafar were also struggling, as they were hit by the blows from nowhere. And as Jafar made his last attempt to catch hold of the invisible man, he was knocked unconscious by the invisible man. And everybody was shouting, hold him, repeatedly. But Griffin had set himself free from them, and nobody was able to understand how to lay hands on him or how to catch him. So this is all in the story. Now we'll discuss the theme of the story and the main message given by the story. So the theme of the story is that as I told you, that this story describes a brilliant scientist named Griffin who degenerated himself into a lawless person, and Griffin discovered that the human body could become transparent and invisible, but he misused his great discovery, and he did not use the power of invisibility for the welfare of the society and humanity at large, but he misused it to threaten, trouble, and beat innocent persons and rob them. He made illegal entries in the stores and shops and stole things from there. He committed a burglary in a clergyman's house in Ipin, and Griffin remained invisible or unseen only when he was without clothes. If he put on clothes, he lost his invisibility and could be seen by people around him. So, this lesson gives a message that misuse of science and its great discoveries can make even a brilliant scientist like Griffin a monster and a threatening, lawless person. And it tells us the human nature of misusing their own discoveries. So, this is all in this chapter. Hope you all have understood it. Thank you.